It started with a message, simple, harmless, and yet the spark that would ignite her downfall. "You have the kindest eyes," it read, sent by a verified account with the name Sheikh Rami Al-Qari. Ella didn't think much of it at first. She'd received dozens of messages before, but something about his words, his tone, his photographs, they felt different. His life looked like a dream. Yachts on turquoise seas, desert sunsets, private jets. And he wasn't like the others. He asked about her mind, her dreams, her heart. Weeks turned into months of late-night calls and heart-shaped emojis. He told her she was the kind of woman who belonged in Dubai, not Manchester. But how does a dream become a cage? How does love turn into a weapon? And why didn't she see the danger hiding behind that perfect smile? By the third month, their conversations had become her favorite part of every day. Rami called her Habibti, his voice deep and smooth through the speaker. He told her stories of his business empire, oil shipments, real estate, investments. To Ella, it sounded like magic. A world so far from her small Manchester apartment. She didn't know that every story had been rehearsed, every word part of a script he'd used before. When he said, "Come to Dubai, I'll show you what love really feels like," she believed him. Maybe because she wanted to. Maybe because she thought she'd finally found someone who saw her worth. When the ticket arrived, Ella's hands trembled. A first-class flight to Dubai. The sender, Al Karim Holdings. Her heart raced. She imagined Rami waiting at the gate with flowers. A limousine. Maybe even the skyline she'd seen in his photos. Everyone online said she was lucky. A real-life fairy tale. But fairy tales are written by someone else, and she didn't notice that the name on her visa wasn't her own. It was guest. At Manchester Airport, she wore her best white dress. The one Rami once said made her look like a sunrise. The crowd moved around her, but she felt chosen. As she boarded the plane, she messaged him. "I'm on my way," he replied instantly. "You'll never want to leave." She didn't know how true that was. Dubai shimmered like a jewel beneath the plane. As she stepped out into the golden heat, a driver held a sign. Miss Dawson. No Rami. No flowers. Just a silent man in sunglasses who took her phone and said, "Mr. Sirunwan, Rami waiting. Private." Her smile faltered for the first time. The dream didn't feel like hers anymore. But she told herself it was fine. He was just busy. After all, she'd come all this way for love. The car glided through the neon-lit highways of Dubai, the skyline shimmering like a mirage. Ella pressed her face to the glass, mesmerized. The city felt alive, pulsing, golden, and endless. Her driver said nothing, eyes fixed on the road. When they reached the hotel, it was unlike anything she'd seen. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, fountains that sang. At the front desk, she handed over her passport, but the clerk smiled politely. "Already checked in, Miss Dawson." Confusion flickered, then faded beneath excitement. Maybe Rami had planned everything. Maybe this was the beginning of her new life. Her suite overlooked the Persian Gulf. Glass walls, silk sheets, and a fruit basket labeled "Welcome, Habibti." She twirled barefoot on marble floors, laughing at her own reflection. It felt like a dream, one she never wanted to wake from. Then her phone buzzed, a message from Rami. "Stay in your room. Security is tight tonight. I'll see you tomorrow." The tone was abrupt, colder than before. She brushed it off, thinking maybe he was tired. Still, the silence of that giant room began to hum in her ears. The next morning, a knock at the door. 2 men in suits stood outside, Mr. Rami's associates. They introduced a woman named Amira, a quiet brunette who smiled without meeting Ella's eyes. "Shall help you settle in," one said. Amira showed her around the suite, her hands trembling slightly. When Ella asked if she'd met Rami, Amira froze. "Only once," she whispered. That silence felt heavy, like a warning wrapped in politeness. When Remy finally arrived that evening, he was every bit the prince she imagined. Tailored suit, expensive watch, the faint scent of oud. He kissed her hand and said, "Now you are in my world." His smile reached his lips but not his eyes. Dinner was lavish. Caviar, wine, a private rooftop view. Yet when she asked to post a photo, he placed his hand over hers. "No phones," he said softly. "Some things are too precious for the internet." She smiled, pretending not to feel the chill in his words. Days passed in luxury. Designer shopping, private chauffeurs, silent bodyguards. But something was wrong. Her phone stayed locked in a drawer. Her calls home, delayed for privacy. She saw other women sometimes, beautiful, quiet, escorted by men who never smiled. Amira stopped speaking entirely, her eyes haunted. Late one night, Ella heard shouting in the hallway, then silence. When she opened the door, a trail of a dropped bracelet glimmered on the marble floor. It wasn't hers. The first real crack appeared in something small. A name. Rami introduced her to a guest at dinner, calling himself Mr. Karim, not Rami Toy. The man he greeted replied, "Haddad. Long time." Ella smiled politely, pretending she hadn't heard. But that night, she searched Rami Haddad online. The result was a blurry mugshot and a headline from Lebanon, "Businessman linked to trafficking investigation." Her breath caught. When she looked up, Rami was standing behind her. "Curiosity can be dangerous, habibti," he said softly. "Better to let some things stay buried." After that night, things changed. Her door was guarded, her messages to friends never sent. Rami's charm turned sharp. Every question answered with a look that made her shrink. Amira brought her breakfast one morning and whispered, "Don't trust anyone." The tray trembled in her hands. "They're not who they say they are." Ella's pulse raced. "Who are they?" she asked. But Amira only shook her head, tears forming in her eyes before she walked away. The next evening, Ella found a locked drawer in Rami's office while he showered. Inside, passports, dozens of them, all women. Different countries, different names, same empty eyes in their photos. Her hands shook as she picked up one. Layla Karim, age 23. She recognized her, one of the quiet girls she'd seen at the dinner. But the date of entry stamped on the page was last year. Her mind spiraled. Where was Layla now? When Rami emerged, wrapped in a towel, he noticed the open drawer. The silence was electric. He stepped closer, water dripping from his hair, eyes narrowed. "You were looking for something." Ella froze, unable to speak. His smile returned, slow and cold. "You're safe because I chose you. Remember that." He closed the drawer gently, like sealing a coffin, and walked away. For the first time, she truly felt trapped. That night, Ella couldn't sleep. The sounds of the hallway, footsteps, muffled voices, doors locking, filled her chest with panic. She crept to the window, staring at the glittering skyline that once looked magical. In the reflection, she saw Amira standing silently behind her, eyes hollow. "You want to live," Amira whispered. "Then you listen carefully. Tomorrow, he's leaving for a business trip. When he goes, we run." For the first time, hope flickered, fragile but alive. Rami's business trip came sooner than expected. He kissed Ella's forehead that morning, told her to stay inside, and left with two men she'd never seen before. The moment the elevator doors closed, Amira rushed into Ella's room. "We have until midnight," she whispered. She led Ella through a narrow corridor hidden behind a mirror panel, an emergency passage known only to staff. But before they reached the end, a guard's voice echoed down the hall. Amira froze. "Go back," she whispered, her face pale. "If they see me, I'm dead. The fairy tale had turned into a nightmare maze. They returned to the suite pretending nothing had happened. Minutes later, 2 guards entered. Tall, silent, their presence suffocating. "Security check," one said, searching drawers, phones, even under the bed. Ella's pulse pounded. One of them held up the open drawer of passports. "Mr. Ramy says you touched his things." Ella froze, her throat dry. Before she could answer, the guard smiled faintly. "Don't worry, miss. He likes you for now." Then they left. The lock clicked behind them, a sound sharper than any scream. That night, Ramy called her. His voice was calm, too calm. "You looked through my drawer," he said. "That's not what love looks like," Ella tried to explain, voice cracking. But he interrupted. "Love is obedience, habiti. Remember that." The line went dead. Moments later, her phone restarted, all messages deleted, contacts gone. Even her photos of home had vanished. She wasn't Ella Dawson anymore. She was just another name on one of his lists. Days blurred into one another. No calls, no visitors, no escape. The guards rotated shifts outside her door, and meals were left without a word. Amira stopped coming. Then one morning, a new girl appeared. Younger, frightened, eyes darting like a trapped bird. She said her name was Layla. The name struck Ella's chest like lightning. She was supposed to be gone. When Ella whispered, "How long have you been here?" Layla just shook her head and whispered, "Too long." That night, the sound of shouting returned, but this time, it didn't stop. Ella pressed her ear to the door and heard a woman crying, men arguing in Arabic. Then, silence. A door slammed. When she opened her own door a crack, Amira stood there, bruised and shaking. They found out about the passage. She whispered, "They're moving everyone tomorrow." Her voice broke. "If we don't run tonight, we'll disappear like the rest." Ella didn't hesitate. The dream was gone. All that was left was survival. By dawn, the hallway was empty. Too empty. The new girl, Leela, was gone. Her bed stripped, her clothes missing. When Ella asked the guard where she was, he shrugged. "Transferred," that word echoed in her skull. Amira refused to eat, hands trembling. "Transferred means sold," she whispered. Ella wanted to scream, but fear sealed her throat. The air smelled of perfume and bleach, a mixture of beauty and death. She realized this wasn't a secret relationship anymore. It was a market. Ella couldn't stay silent anymore. She crept into Ramy's office again, shaking, and dug deeper through his files. Behind false drawers, she found a leather binder labeled Clients. Each page listed women's names beside country flags and dollar amounts. Her own photo was near the bottom, next to a number. Her stomach turned. She snapped photos with Amira's hidden phone. Heart racing, every click of the camera sounded like a gunshot in her ears. She hid the photos under her pillow, praying for a chance to escape. That night, the guards celebrated in the hallway, music and laughter muffled through the door. Amira slipped a small keycard into Ella's hand. "Service elevator," she whispered. Her eyes glimmered with desperation and hope. Ella gripped her hand. "If we get out, we go to the police." Amira nodded, but her lips trembled. "Just don't look back." Outside, the city was asleep. Inside, their war had begun. Just before midnight, they moved. Barefoot, silent, their breaths synchronized like prayers. Ella swiped the keycard at the service elevator and held Amira's hand tight. The doors slid open, but inside stood a guard. For a second that felt like forever, no one moved. Then Amira shoved Ella back and screamed. The guard grabbed her. Ella ran. Down a side stairwell, heart hammering, tears burning her eyes. Amira's screams echoed behind her until they didn't. "No," she shouted, "it's Shry." Ella burst onto the loading dock behind the hotel, lungs on fire. She hid behind steel crates, shaking, clutching the phone to her chest. She scrolled through photos of the passports, the faces, Layla's name, her own. Then she saw a contact number scribbled in the binder's last page, Interpol tip line. She dialed, whispering, "My name is Ella Dawson. He's not a sheikh, he is a trafficker." Static filled the line, then a calm woman's voice, "Stay hidden. Help is coming." For the first time in months, Ella let herself believe it. The line stayed open for 40 seconds, long enough for Ella to whisper the hotel's name, her floor number, and the phrase, "He's coming back." The operator's voice remained calm, promising help, but each second felt like a lifetime. Outside, engines roared. The black Mercedes had returned. She ducked lower behind the crates, heart thundering, watching Rami step out, phone pressed to his ear, eyes scanning the loft. The monster was home early. The monster was home early. Inside the lobby, Rami barked orders. "Search every floor." "She's here." Ella slipped through the loading bay into a maintenance tunnel, barefoot, trembling. Above her, she heard boots pounding marble. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. "Stay low. Team inbound in 12 minutes." She almost laughed. 12 minutes felt like 12 years. Somewhere above, a door slammed. The sound jolted her into running again. Interpol arrived like ghosts. Unmarked SUVs, sirens muted. Detective Sarah Kent led the strike. Methodical, silent, precise. 2 targets inside, multiple victims, she whispered into her radio. Inside, Remy's guards drew their weapons. The first flashbang split the night in 2. Ella covered her ears, light searing her eyes as shadows moved through smoke. For the first time, someone was fighting for her. When the gunfire stopped, everything went quiet except the hum of engines and the ringing in Ella's ears. She saw Rami pinned to the ground, cuffed, his eyes burning with disbelief. Detective Kent knelt beside Ella, placing a blanket over her shoulders. "It's over," she said gently. But Ella's voice cracked. "Not for the others." Kent nodded. "We'll find them all." Ella finally let her body collapse into trembling relief. Words. The sunlight bled across the skyline as ambulances lined the street. Ella watched other women being led out, faces pale, eyes hollow, like waking ghosts. Amira was among them, bruised but alive. Their eyes met, and both broke into tears. Behind police tape, cameras flashed, reporters shouted. But Ella didn't look back at Rami. He was just another man now, stripped of his masks. Somewhere deep inside, she knew she'd never be the same. But at least she was free. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and flowers. Reporters waited outside, shouting her name. But Ella stayed silent. Her hands shook as she signed her statement. The paper dotted with trembling ink. Detective Kent sat beside her, explaining each charge filed against Rami Haddad. Fraud, kidnapping, human trafficking. The words sounded unreal. Ella stared at her reflection in the window, pale and bruised but alive. "You saved lives," Kent said softly. Ella looked up and whispered, "Then it was worth it." Days later, she watched the news. "Fake Sheikh exposed," the anchor said. Rami's face filled the screen. No royal charm, just a hollow man in handcuffs. Behind him, photos of women rescued in the raid flashed one by one. Each face told a story of broken trust and stolen dreams. Ella muted the TV and stared at the silent images. For the first time, she wasn't angry, just sad that she'd ever believed in fairy tales spun from pixels. 1 week later, Ella met Amira again, at a safe house run by Interpol. Amira's hair was shorter now, her smile small but real. They didn't talk much, they didn't have to. Over tea, Amira whispered, "Lila's family knows. They'll bring her home." Ella nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. For a long time, they sat together, Two strangers bound by the same nightmare, slowly learning how to breathe again. Months passed. The bruises faded, but the silence stayed. Ella began speaking at universities and online panels about digital manipulation and trafficking. They don't hunt in dark alleys anymore, she told the crowd. They hunt in comments and DMs. Every time she spoke, another girl reached out. Another story came forward. What once felt like shame turned into strength. She was no longer the girl who fell for a sheikh. She was the woman who survived him. One quiet evening, Ella returned to Manchester. The same rain tapped against her window. The same city lights blinked outside. But she wasn't the same woman who had answered that message months ago. She opened her laptop, scrolling past dozens of new DMs, then closed it gently. She walked to the window, whispered a silent goodbye to the ghost of the girl who believed in perfect love. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean.